Welcome on in, football fans. It's your boy, Gsluke, here with our DFS and prop preview for Week 10 of the NFL season. Gonna get you ready for all your Sunday exposure with a breakdown of the DFS and the prop betting side of things. First off, on Draftkings, we'll go through my top quarterback stacks, a few game environments that I'll be getting well over the field on. We got some potential shootouts, some high-scoring games, also offenses that I think are worth attacking in your lineups. And then afterwards, we're gonna focus on the prop and the betting side with some underdog props that I've already mixed in. Also, a Hard Rock Bet two-leg parlay that you might want to consider tailing for yourself to give you a game plan for your Sunday exposure. So without further ado, we've got a lot to go through here together. Let's get this thing rolling. First up, we got Josh Allen and the Bills going up against the Miami Dolphins, and a 49.5 point over-under game. There's expected to be some healthy offense between these two teams, but the Bills are healthy favorites, as you'd expect with them being one of the better teams that we have in the league, so their team total is a lot higher than what we have on the Miami side, and that's why the ownership is behind Josh Allen. But I think that's warranted with the kind of rushing upside he brings to the table. He's one of the few quarterbacks that has a true 30-plus point ceiling on a week like this, and I don't even think you have to use him in a full team stack. You see over here towards the right side that I'll be using him in team stacks at times, but also using him naked by himself, and it's because of that rushing upside, and also because he has so many different passing options that he distributes the ball to that you don't have to have 2 or 3 guys stacked up with him. But a Khalil Shakir, Don Kincaid, Coleman, a Cook, a Knox, a Moore, Samuel are all players that you could pair up with him, but you don't have to go overboard like you'll see with some of these other quarterbacks. And on the flip side, you also have a lot of pass catching options that you can use as a buyback because the Dolphins are the underdogs and are likely going to be playing from behind. I don't hate the idea of using Achane for his receiving usage out of the backfield. Number 1 wide receiver Jalen Waddle, of course, is always going to be playable, but even some of these secondary options like a Dolchik, you have a Washington, or a Nick Westbrook-Ikhine, you could use for a lot of ownership leverage because Josh Allen is not going to be low owned at the quarterback position. In fact, there's a few stacking options like Kincaid that are getting some steam themselves, so you do have to be careful about that ownership, but you've got the rest of the lineup to work with, and it doesn't always have to be that quarterback where you're getting your leverage and you're taking your stand against the rest of the field. Sometimes it's okay to eat a chalkier quarterback stack at times and then get that differentiation with your value running backs and wide receivers. So that's personally what I'm going to be doing when I'm going with these sort of builds. But on the other side of this game, it's worth noting that Tua Tagovailoa is not a terrible play for this Sunday either. You can see his ownership is much lower at only 1.1%, also a lot cheaper at only $4,800. So if you're trying to spend up at running back, wide receiver, and you need some of those salary savings, this isn't a terrible idea both from that perspective and for some potential ownership leverage. So I'm going to have some Tua-led lineups where a Waddle and Achane are in there stacked up with him, and unlike a Josh Allen that has the rushing upside, this is the kind of quarterback that I would not play naked. I need him with at least 1 pass catcher in every single case, and in a lot of cases 2+ pass catchers that we're using alongside with him. But it's a little bit of a different situation when using a Tua. It changes your salary, of course, with nearly a $2,000 difference between the quarterbacks, which helps you out at other positions. And quarterback stack number 2 is going to be Lamar Jackson going up against the Minnesota Vikings. He's also a quarterback with rushing upside, so just like a Josh Allen, you could use him naked at times as well. And this total is in the high 40s. It's at 48.5 points, one of the top 5 highest over-under games that we have on the main slate, and it's 2 competent offenses that are going at it. You got Lamar Jackson with all of his wide receivers and running backs healthy. On the flip side, you have JJ McCarthy, who might even be a slight downgrade from Carson Wentz after that injury, but it is what it is, I guess, for the Vikings at this point. With all of his receivers, though, you got a Hawkinson, an Addison, a Jefferson, a Naylor. You even got the running backs like Mason and Aaron Jones that you can use out of the backfield. He has one of the best supporting crews in all of the NFL, which makes this game environment extremely favorable for fantasy purposes because we have 2 willing dance partners, that high total to begin with, and if we get a 55 to a 60+ point game, you're going to need a lot of pieces from this scenario. So let's start with Lamar Jackson, who you do have a lot of people you can use along with him. You, of course, have a Derrick Henry. He's probably not my favorite option to stack up with Lamar, but if he takes a dump off for a long touchdown, that would be his way to getting there with Lamar. But more traditionally, it'd be guys like Zay Flowers, Mark Andrews, Rashad Bateman, Isaiah Likely, Justice Hill, or DeAndre Hopkins that I'm using alongside with Lamar. And don't sleep on guys like Hopkins that has big playability, has shown some chemistry chemistry with Lamar Jackson, especially earlier this year, and Lamar was hurt, right? Hopkins, coincidentally, his production dropped off a cliff when he was dealing with the backup quarterbacks. Don't be surprised if Hopkins has a few big games this year. So Lamar plus somebody like a Hopkins would be an easy way to differentiate yourself off of that 11% ownership at quarterback, which just like a Josh Allen, he is getting a lot of that steam, but it's for a good reason. Both of these quarterbacks are in extremely favorable scenarios, high total games as the big favorites with some of the highest team totals that we've seen the entire year, and they've got all of their weapons to work with, which might make it hard to narrow down exactly who's going to go off alongside with them. But if you spread out your exposure, you give yourself pretty equal shares across the board, that's usually the best way to handle these sort of offenses. And on the other side of things, you've got Jefferson, Addison as buybacks, Hawkinson, all of those skill position players that we were mentioning before. But just like the first stack, I'm also considering some JJ McCarthy, who is only $4,900. He's projecting for 3.5x points per dollar value at quarterback, one of the better marks that we have on the slate. But because of that, is also getting some ownership as well. So I've got him about 8.1% owned, as opposed to Tua that was only 1.1% owned at that quarterback position. So you're not getting as much ownership leverage going down to a McCarthy, but you are saving a whole bunch of salary, almost about $2,000 from player to player, which can be used to spend up at running back, wide receiver, or even just across the board, giving yourself better plays at every position. That is massive when it comes to your total lineup construction. So just like that first game, I'm looking at that secondary quarterback stack, but primarily if I can afford these two quarterback stacks, that is a big if, because they are nearly $7,000, I'm going to be using them whenever I can. And then the last quarterback stack that we've got here is a Baker Mayfield going up against New England. The other side of this game, Drake May, is only $200 more expensive than Baker, and I think that he's an excellent play in this scenario as well. But you got a 49.5 point total, one of the higher marks of the week once again, but a really close spread here. So unlike the first couple games where it could be a little bit rushing heavy in the second half if those teams get a big lead, this game is not expected to be as lopsided. And we could see it going back and forth. Baker Mayfield has been in those sort of games the entire year, and they're a great fantasy offense to attack. So that's why he's the core play that we're going with here. But a Drake May on the other side is certainly going to be in a lot of my lineups too. They're about 7% owned apiece, so they're a little bit lower owned than those first two quarterbacks that we went through, but not low owned quarterbacks that we have on the slate. There are a bunch of sub 5%ers that you can use if you're trying to get leverage at this position. It's more so going after the proper game environments and teams where we could see a 25 to a 30 point performance at quarterback. Unlike the first two quarterbacks, he is a little bit more passing heavy than rushing heavy, so I am going to be using him with at least one pass catcher in every single lineup, a lot of times with 2+ pass catchers because of the kind of game stack that we're playing here. But in Ibuka, Tez Johnson, a Sterling Shepard, a Kadon, a Rashad White are all options that you can consider. And Godwin is technically questionable. He's probably going to be out, but if he plays, you could add him onto that list as well. And then for the buybacks, by the way, if you're using a Drake May stacks, all of these players are great buybacks to any of that kind of exposure. On the Drake May side, though, you've got Stephon Diggs, Travion Henderson, who will be the running back one if Ramondre Stevenson is out again, currently projecting him out, so he would be a great fill-in spot if that were to be the case. You also have a Hunter Henry, a Pop Douglas, you got a Mac Hollins at wide receiver, and especially with the case of like a Hollins, Henderson will be probably about 10% owned, same thing with the Diggs, but there are a few guys like Hunter Henry that shouldn't be that chalky at the tight end position, where if you're pairing them along with these chalkier quarterbacks, maybe a buyback option like an On that's not that chalky, or a Sterling Shepard or a Tez Johnson that's not super chalky on that Tampa Bay side, you can offset some of that 7% ownership. So, and whether you're doing that or not, you can go with some of the chalkier stacking options if you want to, right? If you want to go Baker, Egbuka, Tez, and then run it back with the Stephon Diggs or Henderson, then so be it. Just get different with one of the 4 or 5 other players that you have in that lineup. So, and lineup construction has to be looked at as a whole, right? There can be chalky pieces or there can be super low end pieces that you're mixing in, but it doesn't mean anything unless you're looking at the entire picture. So keep that in mind with your lineup construction. Another game environment that I think makes a whole lot of sense. Also, a few other special games to point out, maybe that didn't make the video here, but are also high totals. You've got Jared Goff going up against the Commanders. Detroit, big favorites. It's also about a 49.5 point total. So that's that's a game that you can keep an eye on, but you have the Jane Daniels injury on the other side, so that's why it was the one that didn't make this video, as it might not be as competitive as some of the other games where we have healthy quarterbacks and more competent offenses on either side. And then also we have the Rams versus the 49ers. Purdy is limited in practice so far this week. If he ends up missing, it'll be Mac Jones playing quarterback. Whoever's quarterback for that 49ers team, and on the flip side, Matthew Stafford even makes sense to use in some stacks. That's another high total game, close towards even a 50-point total, and a relatively close spread as well. So that's another game that you could throw out there. Didn't include that one because we don't know at this point who's actually playing quarterback for the 49ers, but another worthy game environment that you might want to give an extra side eye or two for your lineups. And now for the prop in the betting side, where I've got a couple slips you might want to consider tailing for yourself. First off will be an Underdog with this 3-legger that pays 6x, and the first prop's going to be Judkins over on rushing touchdowns, who is minus 150 towards the over on the Pinnacle two-way market. That's for his anytime touchdown line though, but on other major books, he's minus 160 to minus 170 to score at any point. And considering that he's got a 1.5 reception line on books, and he's juiced towards the under at that 1.5 as well, he's not expected to put a whole bunch of receiving usage up on the table. And for this point of the year, it's been 85-90% of his usage that has been with the rushing. So, if we have that minus 150 to minus 170 to score, vast majority of the equity is going to be on the ground for us, which is making this value towards the over. And we've got the same thing with the second prop as well. So that's the James Cook over on rushing touchdowns, who, again, if you saw the fantasy section, big favorites for the Buffalo Bills, one of the higher total games that we have on the slate, and he's close to minus 200 to score in a lot of the major books. And just like a Judkins, he's more of a rushing first kind of player. He's got a 17.5 rushing attempt line on a lot of the major books and a 2.5 reception line. So he does have some equity to score that receiving touchdown, but vast majority of them, 75-80% of them, are going to come with this rushing side. And considering that he's got better odds to score, and minus 200 even better than that to score in a lot of the two-way markets, that's why I'm mixing that one in as well. And we're not going to have direct lines for comparison. Not a lot of books will go out there and post rushing touchdown lines, especially a lot of the major books that have more reputable markets for us to compare to. But when we can find rushing heavy running backs that have really good anytime touchdown odds, I usually mix them in as the traditional analysis makes a whole lot of sense. And then the last leg of this one's going to be a DK Metcalf over on receptions. I actually played this on Prize Picks, but they ended up moving a lot of the props on Prize Picks that I took already, so we're going to play those on Hard Rock Bet here in a second. But DK Metcalf at 3.5 receptions is somebody that's even up at 4.5 on different sports books, and he shoots towards the under on the books that do have him at that 4.5 mark. But the Steelers are underdogs against the Chargers. They should be in pass first mode for at least a good portion of that game, and they didn't get a wide receiver 2 at the trade deadline. And you guys know I'm a Steeler fan, you might see some of the memorabilia in the back. I was hoping, begging that Omar Khan would bring in somebody with a pulse to be that second wide receiver for the Steelers, and they didn't do it. So DK Metcalf is still going to be that alpha dog. They've been using a lot of the tight ends lately, but to start the year, DK Metcalf was his favorite wide receiver, and in a negative game script where they have to pass the ball a bit more, Aaron Rodgers has like a 32.5 passing attempt line, even juiced towards the over in a few spots. He's at 33.5, I think, on a few of the sports books as well. He's going to get plenty of opportunities to post those 4+ receptions for us. So he's minus 130 or more towards the over on a lot of the major books that have him at this sort of number. And like I said, even up at 4.5 in spots, showing the kind of value that we have on that lean. So if we go 3-0 there, that'll be a 6x payout on the underdog side. Worth noting that DK Metcalf is available on Prize Picks. So if you have a few props over there that we're trying to find a pairing for, DK Metcalf could very well be that for you. But on Hard Rock Bet, we're going to enter a few props I was able to snipe on Prize Picks before. But as you guys know, the line movement on these pick'em sites tends to be pretty sensitive. If you don't catch it within the first couple hours of it dropping, a lot of times it'll be gone by the time you go out there and check, which is why my Patreon page is such a great resource to have. Of course, all of the bets that I take are posted over there as soon as I entered them. So for example, Bijan Robinson, who's now down at 66.5 yards on Prize Picks, we got it 70.5 on Prize Picks last night. A Trey McBride at 6.5 receptions, he was even money, just regular prop on Prize Picks. Now he's a goblin prop towards the over at 6.5. But on Hard Rock Bet, if you are somebody that's down in Florida like I am, that has access to the pick'em sites and Hard Rock Bet Sportsbook, then you can still enter them over there. In fact, this is a 3.37x payouts for this combination, which is better than what you get for a two-man on Prize Picks. So if anything, this is the best spot by far to play it at this point. But Bijan Robinson, he was at 69.5 rushing yards on Pinnacle in minus 151 towards the under. In most of the books, he is down at 66.5 on Prize Picks now. Most of them had him at that sort of a number. So it's a tough matchup. The Falcons are about touchdown underdogs against the Colts. Colts have just been steamrolling teams up until my Steelers last week, who gave them an ass whooping. That was awfully fun to watch. But they are the favorites again. They're 7-point favorites against the Falcons, which is, not favorable for that game scripting, right? As a running back, if you want to get a bunch of touches, you want to be playing from ahead, which is why we liked that under at 70.5. So again, if your sports book that you have access to, or even the prop site, maybe it's one of the smaller ones out there that hasn't adjusted their lines quite yet, 70.5 on Bijan Robinson is certainly value towards the underside. And then the other prop we have here is Trey McBride over on receptions. He's at 6.5. Minus 125 isn't quite even money on Hard Rock Bet, but still good enough value to take, especially at the 3.37x payout that we're getting on this two-man right here. And he's an underdog against the Seahawks. The Seahawks have also been steamrolling teams. They got even better at the trade deadline, which is a scary prospect for anyone that's in the NFC. Hell, even the AFC team that might have to face them in the Super Bowl. And that's maybe a hot take, but they're looking like one of the candidates to get through the NFC and potentially have to play a Mahomes, a Josh Allen, a Lamar Jackson on the other side. But Trey McBride as 7-point underdogs is likely going to get a whole bunch of targets. You got Jacoby Brissett playing quarterback. Kyler Murray was just put on IR, which I think is extremely favorable for the receiving targets on Arizona. He's been more effective. He's been throwing the ball more. They've just been a better offense over the last month. So Trey McBride at 6.5 receptions, I'll gladly mix in at this sort of a number because on other sports books, he was minus 140 towards the over on Draftkings. He was like minus 136, minus 138, something like that for the over on FanDuel last night. Either way, much heavier juice than what we have here on Hard Rock Bet. So consider those two on the sports books, maybe on some of the smaller pick'em sites like I was mentioning before. But for every single prop that I'm entering as they drop, make sure to check out the Patreon page via the link in the description of the video. Alrighty guys, that's all I've got for the DFS and prop preview. Go ahead and smash that like button if y'all haven't already. Also subscribe to the channel so you guys don't miss any of the content to come. We have all the showdown slates covered here, also main slate like you guys just saw, so you guys don't want to miss any of that throughout the rest of 2025. And also comment down below who you've got as the top scorer for the Sunday main slate. If you get that top score correct, you'll get a free month access to everything I have on my Patreon. That includes the DFS projections that you saw before. You can download that with my entire player pool across all the different positions. Also on the prop and betting side of things, you'll get access to every single bet that I'm entering for NFL this year just by guessing that top scorer. So go ahead, boost the algorithm, comment down below who you've got as the top scorer for this weekend. Best of luck with that, the giveaway with any of your exposure as well. I hope to see a lot of you towards the top end of those GPPs. It's cash out and some of that prop exposure too, and let's have ourselves a day.